everyone, welcome back to the Baking Boot Camp. In this next lesson, we're going to be talking about the creaming method. If you've ever made chocolate chip cookies, then you are definitely familiar with the creaming method. It's a very common mixing method in baking, but there's a lot that can go wrong, so that's what we want to cover today. The creaming method is also known as the sugar shortening method. If you remember from the previous method, we talked about how any kind of solid fat is referred to as shortening. And so that's what we're doing in this method, is we're mixing together our sugar and our solid fat, or our shortening, in order to incorporate air into the mixture. And that's really the main goal of the creaming method, is in order to incorporate that air into your mixture to create a nice light and fluffy baked good in the end. So let's dive into the creaming method. So first off, when are you going to be using the creaming method? The creaming method you're going to usually use for cookies, for kind of cupcakes, or cakes, of course. But you also want to look for that language in the directions of the recipe. Usually you'll see a direction step such as saying cream your butter and sugar together. Or it might say mix your butter and sugar together until light and fluffy. Those are two kind of cues there that you're going to be using the creaming method. So let's talk about the tools that you're going to need for the creaming method. My favorite is, of course, my stand mixer. It makes quick work of things, and it allows me to be able to kind of get something else done while my butter and sugar are being creamed together. That being said, though, this is a very powerful machine. So you just want to keep an eye on how long you're creaming for and at what speed. If you don't want to invest in a stand mixer, and I totally get it, it's a really big investment, you might want to just then go with a simple hand mixer. I always have a hand mixer as well, because sometimes I just don't want to get out the stand mixer. This is a great option for you, and it's definitely a lot cheaper to go with. If you don't want to invest in any of these, and again, this is probably going to run you about $40, $50 for a good one. You can always just simply go with just a wooden spoon. If your butter is at a nice soft room temperature, you can mix your butter and sugar together using just a wooden spoon. It's going to take a little bit more elbow grease, but it definitely can be done. And of course, to pick these up is just a couple of dollars. I always do recommend, though, no matter which tool you decide to cream your butter and sugar together with, always just have a spatula on hand in order to scrape down the sides of the bowl and make sure that you're getting all of the butter incorporated into the sugar. So now let's dive into the science behind the creaming method. The results that you get from the creaming method are going to depend on three things: the amount of time that you cream your mixture, the temperature of your ingredients, and the type of shortening that you use. So let's dive into each of these. Remember here, our goal is to trap air into our mixture. And how that happens is the sugar those tiny sugar granules are going to punch holes into your butter, which creates pockets of air. Those air pockets are surrounded by the fat in your mixture. And when they are in the oven, the liquid in your fat is going to evaporate, create steam, and cause those air pockets to expand. So it's important to note that even though we're still adding chemical leaveners like baking powder or baking soda to our mixture, they don't actually trap or create air pockets. They simply create gas, which expands the air pockets that are already present in our mixture. The amount of time that you cream your mixture is going to have different results. If you don't cream your mixture long enough, then you're not going to incorporate enough air to help your cake or cookies rise properly. Too long and you might incorporate too much air, and although your cake will rise in the oven because of your leavening agents, when you take it out, you might see your cake or cupcakes collapse on itself. And if you see in this picture below, you'll actually see those kind of gummy streaks. So that's a result of over creaming the mixture. So now let's talk about the temperature of our butter. We want butter that's at room temperature, which is about 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If the butter is too cold, the sugar is not going to be able to punch through and create those air pockets. If it's too warm, those pockets won't even be created because the sugar will just slice right through, or they'll just be quickly created and then collapse. So we want to use room temperature butter, but also room temperature ingredients so that we don't solidify that butter later on in the process. So I just want to show you what room temperature butter looks like. Here is a stick of butter that's cold straight from the fridge. This is my room temperature butter. And here I have butter that I defrosted in the microwave. So for a cold stick of butter straight from the fridge, I try to put my finger into it and leaves no indent. Here you can see with the room temperature it's going to leave a slight indent, and with the butter that I put in the microwave you can see it goes straight through. So this is what we're looking for, where you kind of get some resistance but it still leaves an indent into your butter. So now let's look at the difference in butter temperature and how that affects chocolate chip cookies. So we have 4 different batches here, straight from the fridge, below room temperature, and above room temperature butter. The 2 cookies on the left spread more than the room temperature cookie, and that is again because the air pockets weren't created because the temperature of the butter was too cold in order to create those air pockets. So there was not as much lift and rise when they were in the oven. The above room temperature, again, the butter was too warm, so the sugar would slice right through and those air pockets then will collapse. And what you'll get then is, again, a cookie that won't be able to have as much air pockets that expand in the oven. So again, they won't lift and rise as much. So you get cookies that'll spread more than the room temperature butter. Keep in mind, though, with the creaming method, the type of shortening that you use, it's going to yield different results. So if you look at these 2 types of cookies here, the one on the left was made with all butter, where the one on the right was made with half shortening and half butter. And you can see the cookie made with all butter spread more than the one with half shortening. And that is difference in melting point that we talked about in the previous video. Because the butter will spread because of the lower melting point, it'll spread more before the cookie has time to set up, as opposed to the shortening, which has a higher melting point. Now that we've covered the ins and outs of the creaming method, let's get to baking.